There was a time when Democrats supported free speech. There was a time when members across the aisle actually believed in the First Amendment. Unfortunately, that time has long since passed. In 2014, Congress considered an amendment from Democrats to repeal the free speech provisions of the First Amendment. I was at the time the ranking member on the Senate Constitution Subcommittee, the Judiciary Committee. I led the fight against it. Ultimately, that amendment came to a vote on the Senate floor, and every single Senate Democrat voted to repeal the free speech protections of the First Amendment.
Could you be more specific about what that vote was?
Sure. It was a vote that would have given Congress plenary power to regulate. The initial version was to regulate any and all political speech by anyone. It literally would have said any expenditure of money for political speech. So it would have said that if a little old lady went to Home Depot and spent $5 to buy a cardboard sign and a stick to say, vote the bum out, that Congress could make it a felony and put her in jail. It also could have given Congress the ability to criminalize union organizing. The Democrats realized that that version of the amendment was too extreme even for them, so there was a second version that Senator Durbin offered that limited its restrictions only to corporations. However, it had plenary authority to any political speech by a corporation. Now, I'll point out Paramount Pictures is a corporation, Simon & Schuster is a corporation, NBC is a corporation, the NAACP is a corporation, Planned Parenthood is a corporation, the Brennan Center is a corporation. Under the proposed amendment, Congress would have had blanket authority to regulate any and all political speech by any corporation in America. It was blatantly unconstitutional, and every single Democrat voted for it when it was voted on the floor. There was a time, by the way, previously when Democrats tried to repeal the First Amendment to the Constitution, the free speech protections, there were a handful of lions of the Senate that spoke out against it. Russ Feingold courageously spoke out against it. Ted Kennedy gave a floor speech saying, we haven't amended the Bill of Rights in over 200 years and now is no time to start. I gave a floor speech with a picture of Ted Kennedy behind me, nearly scared my father to death when he saw me on TV with Ted Kennedy behind me. But I pleaded, is there not one Ted Kennedy on the Democratic side who believes in free speech? There wasn't a single one. Unfortunately, with this bill, that is combined by the recent willingness of the left to engage in threats of violence and intimidation against speech they don't like. We saw that with Antifa and Black Lives Matter riots all across this country, with Democrat politicians turning a blind eye, that culminated in the current Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris, raising money to bail out of jail violent rioters threatening fellow citizens. We saw it just recently with a leak of a draft decision of the Supreme Court and then left-wing groups publishing the addresses of Supreme Court justices and violent rioters going to the homes of Supreme Court justices, and the Biden Department of Justice refusing to enforce federal criminal law that makes it a crime to protest at the home of a justice. But our Attorney General Merrick Garland refuses to enforce that law, and the result of that, as we saw just weeks ago, a deranged man arrested for the attempted murder of Justice Brett Kavanaugh. That is truly a toxic stew of the current Democrats' unwillingness to protect free speech and willingness to engage in violence and threats of violence against their political enemies. What does that mean for something like the Disclose Act? Well, we saw in California in 2008 when there was a referendum on the ballot in support of traditional marriage, and a majority of Californians, bright blue California, voted in support of traditional marriage, and the names of those contributors were outed, and left-wing groups published their home addresses, and people got fired for their job for, by the way, contributing to what was then the political position of people like Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. And yet people got fired for their jobs to daring to speak out. Look, the landmark case on this is NAACP versus Patterson. In that case, the state of Alabama, run by Democrats, wanted to target the people that were members of the NAACP. They wanted to go after them and persecute them. Sadly, it was the Democrats that founded the Klan, And they wanted to go after the NAACP. That case went to the Supreme Court in 1958, and the Supreme Court unanimously ruled that the NAACP, you couldn't force them to hand over their membership lists because it violates their First Amendment rights of free association. This Disclose Act is designed to target and harass speech that the left doesn't like. It is blazingly unconstitutional. I will mention something, though, to my Democratic colleagues. My time's expired, but I will say, if you want to see more disclosure, and if you think the current system is idiotic, and I think the current system of super PACs is idiotic, every year in Congress I've introduced legislation called the Super PAC Elimination Act. It would do two very simple things. It would, number one, allow unlimited individual contributions to campaigns, not corporations, not unions, individuals. And number two, it would require immediate 24-hour disclosure of any contributions. It doesn't ban super PACs, but as a practical matter, they would fade away because every candidate would rather control their own message rather than some other group. And yet, I've yet to get a Democrat willing to support it. I want to ask, I apologize, one question if I could ask Mr. Weiner. The Brennan Center supports transparency and disclosure. Over the existence of the Brennan Center, how much money has been given to the Brennan Center specifically by George Soros?
Senator, I don't know how much money specifically, but I will say that...
Will you answer it when I ask you in writing?
Senator will be happy to respond, but I just want to say that I will happily acknowledge that Open Society Foundation is a Brennan Center donor, and we are proud that they have donated to us.
But will you answer the question or give me a lawyerly dodge? Because we both know how to do both of those.
Senator, we'll be happy to respond to a request.
Thank you.